Shall I catch him in time to tell him the first sign? But I suppose it won't matter. If he sees an old friend, he's sure to go and speak to him, isn't he? You will have no time to spare, said the lion. That is why I must send you at once. Come, walk before me to the edge of the cliff. Jill remembered very well that there was no time to spare. That was her own fault. If I hadn't made such a fool of myself, Scrub and I would have been going together, and he'd have heard all the instructions. Cleo. Yeah, how'd that feel? But long before she'd got anywhere near the edge, the voice from behind her said, Stand still. In a moment I will blow. But first remember the signs. Say them to yourself when you wake in the morning and when you lie down at night and when you wake in the middle of the night. And whatever strange things may happen to you, let nothing turn your mind from following the signs. And secondly, I gave you a warning. Here on the mountains I have spoken to you clearly. I will not often do so in Narnia. Here on the mountain the air is clear and your mind is clear. As you drop down into Narnia, the air will thicken. Take great care that it does not confuse your mind. And the signs which you have learned here will not look at all as you expect them to look. When you meet them there, that is why it is important to know them by heart, and pay no attention to appearances. Remember the signs and believe the signs. Nothing else matters. And now, daughter of Eve, farewell. The voice had been growing softer from toward the end of the speech, and now it faded away altogether. Jill looked behind her. To her astonishment, she saw the cliff already more than 100 yards behind her, and the lion himself, a bright speck of gold on the edge of it. She had been setting her teeth and clenching her fists for a terrible blast of lion's breath. But the breath had really been so gentle that she had not even noticed the moment at which she had left the earth. And now there was nothing but air for thousands upon thousands of feet below her. She felt frightened only for a second. For one thing, the world beneath her was so very far away that it seemed to have nothing to do with her. For another, floating on the breath of her lion was extremely comfortable. She found she could lie on her back or on her face and twist any way she pleased, just like you can in water, and if you learn to float really well. And because she was moving at the same pace as the breath, there was no wind, and the air seemed beautifully warm. It was not in the least like being in an airplane, because there was no noise and no vibration. If Jill had ever been in a balloon, she might have thought it was like that, only better. When she looked back, she could take in for the first time the real size of the mountain she was leaving. She wondered why a mountain so huge as that was not covered with snow and ice. But I suppose all that sort of thing is different in this world, thought Jill. When she looked below her, but she was so high, and she couldn't make out whether she was floating over land or sea, nor what speed she was going at. By Jove, the signs, said Jill suddenly. I'd better repeat them. She was in a panic for a second or two. She found she could still say them all correctly. And that's all right, she said, and lay back in the air as if it were a sofa with a sigh of contentment. Well, I do declare, said Jill to herself some hours later, I've been asleep. Fancy sleeping on air. I wonder if anyone's done it before. I don't suppose they have. Oh, bother, Scrub probably has, on the same journey a little bit before me. Let's see what it looks like down below. What it looked like was an enormous, very dark blue plain. There were no hills to be seen, and there were biggish white things moving slowly across it. Those must be clouds, she thought, but far bigger than the ones we saw from the cliff. I suppose they're bigger now because they're nearer. They must be getting lower. Bother the sun. Bother the sun. The sun, which had been high overhead when she began her journey, was now getting into her eyes. This meant it was getting lower ahead of her. Scrub was quite right in everything that Jill I didn't know about girls in general, didn't think much about points of the compass. Otherwise she would have known, when the sun began setting in her eyes, that she was also traveling very nearly due west. Staring at the blue plain below her, she presently noticed that there was little dots of brighter, paler color in it here and there. It's the sea, thought Jill. I do believe those are islands. And so they were. She might have felt rather jealous if she had known that some of them were islands which Scrub had seen from a ship's deck and even landed on. But she didn't know this. Then, later on, she began to see that they were little wrinkles on the blue flatness. By the way, every time it says Scrubs, it's Eustace. It's Eustace's last name. Little wrinkles which must be quite big ocean waves if you were down among them. And now, all along the horizon there was a thick dark line which grew thicker and darker so quickly that you could see it growing. That was the first sign that she had That was the first sign she had of the great speed with which she was traveling, and she knew that the thickening line must be land. Suddenly, from her left, from the wind, though the wind was in the south, a great white cloud came rushing toward her, this time on the same level as herself, and before she knew where she was, she had all shot right into the middle of its cold, wet fogginess. That took her breath away, but she was in only for a moment. She came out blinking in the sunlight and found her clothes wet. She had on a blazer and a sweater and shorts and stockings and pretty thick shoes. It had been a muddy sort of day in England. She came out lower than she had gone in, and as soon as she did, she so noticed something which I suppose she ought to have been expecting, but which came as a surprise and a shock. It was noises. Up till now she had traveled in total silence. Now for the first time she heard the noise of the waves and the crying of seagulls, and now too she smelled the smell of the sea. There was no mistake about her speed now. She saw two waves meet with a smack and spout foam going between them, but she had hardly seen it before it was hundreds of yards behind her. The land was getting nearer at a great pace. She could see the mountains far inland, and other nearer mountains on her left. She could see bays and headlands, woods and fields, stretches of sandy beach. The sound of waves breaking on the shore was growing louder every second and drowning the other sea noises. Suddenly the land opened right ahead of her. She was coming to the mouth of a river. She was very low now, only a few feet above the water. A wave top came against her toe, and a great splash of foam spurted up, drenching her nearly to the waist. Now she was losing speed. Instead of being carried up the river, she was gliding in the river bank to her left. There were so many things to notice that she could hardly take them all in. A smooth green lawn, a ship so brightly colored that it looked like an enormous piece of jewelry, towers and battlements, banners fluttering in the air, a crowd, gray clothes, armor, gold swords, and sounds of music. But this was all jumbled. The first thing that she knew clearly was that she had alighted and was standing under the thicket of trees close by the riverside, and there, only a few feet away from her, was Scrub. The first thing she thought was how very grubby and untidily and generally unimpressive he looked, and the second was, how wet I am. Crazy.